Good afternoon, good evening for some of you, good morning for others, and welcome สวัสดีค่ะขอต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่เสวนานานาชาตินะคะจัดโดย Big Fest ค่ะเทศกาลละครนานาชาติสำหรับเด็กและเยาวชนกรุงเทพหรือว่า Big Fest 2021 International Webinar นะคะในธีม Rethinking Theatre แล้วก็ Education for the New Chapter ค่ะเกิดขึ้นโดยความร่วมมือจากสำนักส่งเสริมการจัดประชุมและนิทรรศการนะคะและขอขอบคุณการสนับสนุนจาก Japan Foundation กรุงเทพและ Thai Theatre Foundation ด้วยค่ะAll right, today's topic also is the finale of the webinar series. The topic is learning through play, practice, and principles. And I am Sasapin Sirwanij. I will be your moderator for today's session. Thank you very much to Big Fest for the invitation and for this opportunity for me to hear from the TYA communities from around the world. Today's topic is an invitation for all of us to listen and think about performing arts for young audiences together with our guest speakers today. How have the TYA artists from different parts of the world thrived and adapted since 2020? And what are their processes of coming up with new ways to continue their practices and relating to their public? And our speakers today are Gemma Pepper, Takashi Matsumoto, Bunpong Panit, Alfredo Zinola, and Adrian Hernandez and Jose Aguero. And for the order, we will go from right to left on the world map, and we have the lady first. And each speaker will take 10 minutes for their presentation, and then we will move to the discussion and Q&A afterwards. And I shall introduce each speaker again in more detail right before their presentations. For now, we have some housekeeping notes to make. For the Q&A session, you can ask your questions by you use the raise hand button, and the Big Fest team will promote you to a panelist so you can ask questions directly to the panelists. Or you can type your questions in the Q&A box. And also at the very end of the session today, Ajima, Big Fest director, will come at the end to wrap up the session. And also this session will be recorded and broadcasted later on Big Fest Facebook page and also Big Fest 2021, Big Fest on the Move website. All right, I think that's done the speaking part of me. Let's begin with the first speaker today. We have Gemma Pepper from Australia. She's CEO and co-founder of Audioplay, which is a moving live experience of theater into the audio realm as a response to global crises, which became the new territory of live experience and play for children. I give the stage now to Gemma, please.
Sorry. Hello. I need to find the unmute button. Hi, I'm Gemma Pepper, CEO and co-founder of Audioplay. And I wanted to start this evening by acknowledging that I am joining you this evening from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Western Australia, who have been custodians of this land for over 65,000 years. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I want to extend my respects to the First Peoples of the lands where you are calling in from also. I'm really humbled to be here in this amazing conversation series. So thank you, Ajima, for giving me this opportunity to be part of it. So at Audioplay, we are really interested in exploring how we can use technology, specifically audio-based technology, to create immersive stories that kids are a central part of. We have developed our own unique technology that allows us to share multiplayer role-play experiences with kids anywhere in the world using mobile devices. Audioplay is essentially podcast meets theatre meets audiobook. So old school make-believe fun, souped up with an amazing soundtrack. So kids put on headphones and step into the story. They become the character, physically playing out the action in real life. I'm going to show you a very short video clip so that'll give you a sense of how it works. If it's clunky due to internet connections or anything, I'll drop a link in the chat also, so you can take a look later on if for some reason it doesn't work. So. Let's do this. Let's go. Excellent. So the team at Audioplay, we come from a theatre background, and our primary focus has always been on creating great stories that are genuinely engaging for our audiences. We actually started this form a number of years ago, well before the pandemic, as a way to reduce our carbon footprint while still connecting with audiences around Australia and around the world. Over the past 18 months or so, we have further refined the way that we connect with families. So we've created a number of new series that families can download from the App Store or from Google Play to play in their homes. We also partner with festivals and venues and libraries, etc. So they can offer those same experiences to their audiences. Or we have a version of Audioplay that can be presented as a live installation at festivals and events where COVID restrictions allow. So there are a few distinct features that set Audioplay apart from other digital media. Firstly, our experiences are primarily audio-based. We aim to have absolutely minimal time where kids are looking at screens. Instead, our audiences are encouraged to put their device in their pocket, out of the way, and just engage through the audio. In this way, kids are more actively playing in the real world. So with real world objects and with real live human beings, the audio is used to tell the story, but the imagery of the story is created in the kids' own minds with their own imaginations. And the story is collaboratively built with those that they are playing with in quite a social sense. We love how audio allows space to kids imagine and play. The second feature is that kids are physically active whilst they play. So unlike TV or a lot of games that are quite passive, we ask kids to get up and move and interact with real world objects and that give structure to the imaginary world that they're playing in. So we might ask them to use blankets and chairs to create a spaceship, or to get a ball of socks from the drawer and use that as an egg in the story. We aim to use really common household objects that you would find in any home, so that it's easy for kids to play, but also it helps kids to see that all those really boring everyday items can become something much more magical with a little bit of imagination. Whilst the Audioplay experience is getting kids up and playing, we see this as a starting point, a point of inspiration. So we love it when kids continue playing after the story has finished. So adding to or changing the story as they go, exercising their imaginations. To encourage this, we often set simple tasks that invite kids to engage in free play that's been inspired by the stories that we create. The other distinct feature of Audioplay is that each player hears the story from their character's point of view. So ordinarily in books or film, you would hear a story predominantly from one perspective, usually the hero defeating the baddies. However, with Audioplay, each player is experiencing the story from their point of view, the point of view of their chosen character. So kids might play once and think they're the hero, while the other player is the baddie. And then by playing again as another character, they can come to see an entirely new side to the story. In this way, we're able to break that common binary of storytelling, the right versus wrong, good versus evil binary. Instead, we can let kids consider a more nuanced understanding of conflict and say there is rarely good and evil, just different approaches or motivations that lead to disagreements. We're really excited about the learning potential of this, particularly when it comes to more complex interpersonal issues where it's often difficult for audiences to see past their own biases or experience their experiences when they're connecting with a story. However, when you're physically being the character, you're in a better position to see the world from that character's point of view, even if it's different from your own. At a practice level, it's been a really long and steep learning curve to move from creating live theatre and performance to essentially creating software and media content, which is ultimately realized as a live experience once it reaches the home. One aspect that you really feel is the distance from the audience. In live performance, you see your audience right there in front of you. You hear them laugh or gasp or fidget when they're bored. So you get a real-time response to the work that you're creating. Digital distribution is very different in that families experiencing your work are at a great distance and from a range of cultural, social contexts that you can't necessarily envisage. And so you need to learn a new language to interpret their responses, either through usage data or actively reaching out and speaking to them about their experience. We found this transition the most challenging and always love those times when we can go into families' homes or connect over Zoom and observe kids playing so we can see their responses right there and then. However, this only really happens when we're testing new stories. So that said, just because I can't see it or hear it doesn't mean that those families are not connecting with the work. And we've just had to learn new ways of reading our audience's responses. Whilst all our experiences are essentially digital, we have had to reassess how we work in the face of COVID. In the past, we have worked with a range of artists from different locations, traveling to work together. However, over the past 18 months, we've had to reshape this approach and move to most of those collaborations being online. The process does lack some nuance in the interaction between artists. However, it does also allow us to work with a wide range of collaborators without worrying about travel costs or border closures and quarantine, and also by reducing our carbon footprint, which is an issue that is only going to become more and more pressing. Moving forward, we're keen to continue to explore the creative potential of the technology we've created, collaborating with new artists and educators to reimagine the possibilities of this form, having other artists create their own work and share it through our platform, and finding new ways of inviting kids to imagine and play. So to that end, if there are any educators or artists in the call that would like to hear more or collaborate in some way, I would love to hear from you. And of course, if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Cool, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gemma. Audioplay looks amazing, and I'd love to be in one of the plays myself and, you know, kind of use that as a way to navigate my own home. That's really cool. I'm sure there'll be a lot more interest and questions after this. So thank you. Then we move from Audioplay's world of the audio to the body and dance with our second speaker, who is Takashi Matsumoto. Takashi is a dance artist and choreographer, and also dance movement psychotherapist, founder of 7 Circles with experience in working cross-culturally with children with autism and learning disabilities, both in the UK and Japan. He has also worked in Thailand at the Rainbow School with stateless children in Sangkhlaburi, Thailand, for empowerment and self-awareness and expression through dance. And apart from presenting his works today, he'll also contemplate on moving forward during and post-pandemic with such a practice. So Takeshi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Pupa. Hi, everybody. My name is Takashi, and I'm a Japanese dance artist based in London. My practice is influenced by contemporary dance psychotherapy, and meditation too. And I would like to say thank you for BICT Festival for having me today. I'm very excited to present my work. So after working as a dancer for 10 years, 10 years in professional context, I started to expand my practice to work in community settings with non-professional dancers, such as babies and toddlers, people with learning disabilities, people with dementia. And as a choreographer, I created an interactive and immersive dance performance called Club Origami for children under 5. If you could go to the next page, please. So I created Club Origami as Little Big Dance commission touring artist, which is to tour this autumn onwards in the UK and beyond. But in this presentation, I would like to share my dance practice with stateless refugee children in Rainbow School, which is located in Sangkaburi in Kanchanaburi region in Thailand, and how I continued working with them during the pandemic. If you could go to the next page, please. So, yeah, thank you. So, this is Rainbow School, and which is located in the remote area in Sangkaburi, close to the border of Myanmar. And there are about 30 children between 5 and 18 years old live and study together. And children are from the hilltop ethnic group like Mon and Karen. And the school is founded by a Japanese woman, her name is Tomoko Kataoka, 11 years ago. And they learned with nature and technology. So I visited the Rainbow School as a volunteer without much knowledge about the children. And then later I found out that these children are stateless refugee children. So I'd like everybody to sort of pause, and I'd like you to imagine for a while. So imagine that you cannot go to school when you want to learn something, when you are so passionate about learning new things and study. I also want you to imagine if you are ill and the hospital doesn't accept you, or you cannot go to holiday when you feel the need to go away. I want you to also imagine that you cannot get a job that you really want to, or you cannot open a bank account, buy a house, or even get married. So when I think about these restrictions, I feel devastated, and also it's unimaginable to me. But also I think that this is quite similar to what we've been experiencing over the last year during the lockdown, when we couldn't, when our movement is restricted. So what does stateless means? The international legal definition of a stateless person is a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. So in simple terms, this means that the stateless person does not have a nationality of any country. Some people are born stateless, but others become stateless. So stateless people may have difficulty accessing basic rights such as education, healthcare, employment, and freedom of movement. So without these things, they can face a lifelong obstacles and disappointment. So as a dance artist, I started to learn about their states and start to question what I could do to support their learning and collaboration to create something for them and with them. So next page, please. So in the winter 2017, I went back to the school with lots of props and my violin to offer what I could for children to learn and explore through play. So the examples are dance and movement as a way of learning their own body, as well as communication, and using props to explore individual boundaries, engaging with touch and contact to build trust, dance to engage with creativity and find their own voice. And this was also opportunity for me to learn through play. So when I come back to the UK, I was inspired how they earn money doing street life. So I also started street life in London, and I was wearing this samurai costume playing violin, and I saved some money to go back to Thailand. I also hold park yoga charity event for people to gather and then practice yoga to raise some money to donate to the school. So next page, please. So in 2018, I went back with an idea to create a short dance film entitled We Belong. And I wanted the film to travel around the world for them to represent their voice and raise awareness of statelessness. And this was an international project and collaboration with a musician from England, Rob Howard, and Israeli filmmaker Imbar, and supported by Asia Europe Foundation. So I would like to share a trailer of the film. So next page, please. Thank you. And if you go to the next page, please. So during the creative process, we explored their identity, growth, connection, and belonging. So I started to ask them to draw what kind of plants would you be if there were plants? And they started to draw really amazing drawings. And that was a starting point for each child to create dance and movement, and then we combined together. Next page, please. There were also obstacles. It's very hot, it's in Thailand, and it also affected concentration. And also rehearsal space was also limited. So often on the concrete or outside. So finding a right place to rehearse. There was also language barrier because I don't speak Thai. So I asked Tomoko, the head of the director, to translate. But it was one week, and it was fantastic rehearsing outside, being with nature, and I was very inspired by the children's input. Next page, please. And the film was screened at various international platforms, especially in Canada and USA as well. Next page, please. And so then pandemic hit, and I didn't want to stop this connection with the school. So but interestingly, this allowed me to really explore with this online platform. So before, the working area was really confined in that area, but by using online, it really developed beyond the area and reaching out internationally. So the one example is the cultural exchange with a school in Belgium. So we had a screening, and then we had also Q&A session with both sides, children in Belgium and children in Thailand. And also I held a charity online performance with the audience from Australia, Bhutan, Belgium, Japan, Thailand, and then the UK. And children had an opportunity to perform in front of the international audiences. And also another example was online teaching opportunities. So I work also in University of Suffolk. So one of the students, she was very interested in teaching dance to children. So it happened online every week as well. Next page, please. So towards the future. So I am committed with this sustainable relationship. So although the movement at the moment is restricted due to COVID, I'm dreaming to going back to face-to-face activities with children and learning from them. So meanwhile, I am also committed to keep finding ways to support the school financially. For example, donating some of my earnings and organizing charity events and help children receive education. And also, I'm passionate about continuing working for and with children who are marginalized and in need of care and attention. So as an artist, I feel committed to maintain playful and sustainable approach to use art as a means to empower children and work against these social constraints, especially social injustice. I always welcome new ideas and collaboration to make it better, develop, and keep expanding, because I believe as a collective being, we can make a real change to make a world a better place to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Takashi. I think your statement at the very end of the presentation can really be seen through the strength that you showed us in your work. It's great to see how the film itself travels on despite the travel regulations that we have now, you know, post-COVID, and also other extended program that it's like having children also perform and connect with other communities, other children elsewhere in the world too, and your own continued support and relationship with the children. I think that's very, very admirable. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see some nature now, a little bit from Takashi, and we'll also move to another kind of nature practice, but in another form, but also in Thailand. So this kind of microscopic nature form that this upcoming speaker is doing is going to be very interesting in a terrarium kind of format. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Bird or Bunpong Panit from Thailand. He's founder and headmaster of Cherry Theatre. Bird will talk about the principles of Cherry Theatre. So it's about learning through creative drama and theatre as the method and process through which children develop their essential life skills through senses, imagination, communication, and expression. He will also talk about his wonderful terrarium theater, which is a very interesting adaptation in the pandemic era through slowing down and scaling down to maintain active engagement and participatory learning process. Let's hear from Bird or Bunpong Panit.
ครับขอบคุณคุณปูเป้แล้วก็ BICT มากเลยนะครับคือ Cherry Theater เนี่ยเราเริ่มต้นจากที่ว่าเราคิดว่าละครเนี่ยมันคือประสบการณ์ที่มันแตกต่างแล้วก็มันเป็นโอกาสของชีวิตนะที่เราสามารถที่จะจัดกระบวนการหรือว่าจัดละครเพื่อสร้างแรงสะเทือนอะไรบางอย่างให้กับเด็กๆได้แล้วก็เด็กๆที่เป็นผู้ดูเนี่ยก็สามารถที่จะสร้างการเปลี่ยนแปลงตัวเองได้แล้วก็พัฒนาทักษะชีวิตได้นะครับคือการทำละครสำหรับเด็กเนี่ยคือผมมองว่าการจัดกิจกรรมเนี่ยนอกจากว่าเราจะเป็นไดเรคเตอร์นอกจากเราจะเป็นโปรดิวเซอร์เป็นแดนเซอร์เป็นอะไรต่างๆแล้วเนี่ยเรายังเป็นเอดูเคเตอร์ด้วยเป็นนักการศึกษาแล้วก็เป็นฟาซิลิเทเตอร์ด้วยนะครับในช่วงของ2 ปีที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยเราก็เห็นการเปลี่ยนแปลงของโรคระบาดเนาะว่าโอ้โหเราแปลกมากเลยอยู่ๆมีโรคระบาดเข้ามาเนาะเราก็เลยทบทวนว่าแนวคิดแบบไหนที่มันสามารถที่จะทำให้เด็กๆสามารถรับมือกับการเปลี่ยนแปลงของโลกใบนี้ได้นะครับเราก็คิดว่าเด็กเนี่ยจำเป็นต้องมีทักษะชีวิตที่มันต่างจากโลกใบเก่าซึ่งโลกใบนี้ข้อมูลเยอะแยะมากมายการจัดการข้อมูลการจัดลิ้นชักชีวิตหรือแม้กระทั่งอารมณ์ต่างๆของเด็กๆเนี่ยก็เปลี่ยนแปลงแล้วก็เด็กๆจะต้องรับมือกับสถานการณ์มากมายที่จะต้องอยู่กับอารมณ์ความรู้สึกนะครับดังนั้นเนี่ยการพัฒนา soft skill นี่นะครับจึงจำเป็นต้องทำอย่างเร่งด่วนเพราะว่าทักษะเหล่านี้มันจำเป็นต้องติดกับเด็กๆไปจนโตแล้วก็ไม่ว่าเขาจะพัฒนาเป็นอาชีพอะไรเนี่ยเราก็คิดว่าเฮ้ยละครเราเนี่ยสามารถไหมที่จะสร้างการเรียนรู้เหล่านี้ได้แล้วก็การเรียนรู้ที่มันแปลสภาพจาก textbook ที่อยู่ในห้องเรียนเนี่ยกลายมาเป็นโลกแห่งการเล่นนะครับซึ่งโลกแห่งการเล่นเนี่ยมันก็จะเป็นแบบ active relationship นะครับดังนั้นผมจะมีกระบวนการของการทำละครแล้วก็กิจกรรมสำหรับเด็กเนี่ยมาให้กับทุกๆท่านได้ดูกันในช่วงก่อน โควิดเนาะแล้วก็หลังจากนั้นปุ๊บเดี๋ยวเรามาดูกันว่าหลังโควิดเนี่ยทาง Cherry Theater ทำอะไรบ้างนะครับซึ่งกิจกรรมเนี้ยเราก็ based on ความรู้เกี่ยวกับเรื่องของสุจิปุริซึ่งเป็นกระบวนการในการพัฒนาการเรียนรู้ชีวิตนะครับโอเควิดีโอ presentation please ครับเดี๋ยวมาดูวิดีโอ presentation นะครับทาง BICT รบกวนเปิดวิดีโอเล็กน้อยครับจะเป็นช่วงก่อนที่เราจะเจอโควิดนะครับว่าเราทำCherry Theater โรงละครเพื่อการพัฒนาเป็นโรงเรียนแห่งแรงบันดาลใจที่จะทำให้เด็กๆเข้ามาแล้วเนี่ยเกิดความสนุกกับการเรียนรู้โดยที่เราเน้นกระบวนการของละครเป็นฐานที่ตั้งในการสร้างการเรียนรู้ให้กับเด็กๆนะครับในช่วงเวลา3ปีที่ผ่านมา Cherry Theater เราทำงานกับชุมชนมากขึ้นโดยที่เราไม่ได้ทำละครเดี่ยวๆแต่ว่าเด็กๆสามารถที่จะใช้พื้นที่ของชุมชนเนี่ยเป็นแหล่งของการเรียนรู้ได้โดยเริ่มต้นตั้งแต่ค่ายสุจิปุรินะครับสุจิปุริเนี่ยเป็นค่ายที่เราใช้กระบวนการละครในการพัฒนาให้เด็กๆกล้าพูดกล้าทำพัฒนาประสาทสัมผัสพัฒนาจินตนาการและการคิดสร้างสรรค์โดยที่สุดเนี่ยเราเน้นว่าเด็กๆสามารถที่จะมองเห็นชุมชนแล้วก็สัมผัสสัมพันธ์กับชุมชนและเกิดการเรียนรู้ได้ผ่านทางตาทางหูทางจมูกทางลิ้นทางกายทางใจเมื่อไหร่ก็ตามที่เราเกิดประสาทสัมผัสที่เกิดการเรียนรู้แล้วเด็กๆจะเกิดจินตนาการขึ้นมาหลังจากนั้นปุ๊บเด็กๆจะกล้าคิดกล้าทำกล้าถามก็คือปุจฉาการที่เด็กกล้าคิดกล้าทำจะทำให้เขามีวิธีการแสวงหาความรู้ที่เป็นตัวของตัวเองส่วนลิขิตเด็กๆจะสามารถที่จะบันทึกถ่ายทอดและสื่อสารออกมาได้ด้วยนะครับเราก็จะสนับสนุนให้เด็กๆได้สร้างสรรค์งานละครหรือสื่อศิลปะขึ้นมาได้ด้วยตัวของตัวเองโดยที่วิธีคิดอันนี้มันก็สอดคล้องกับละครสร้างสรรค์หรือกระบวนการของละครสร้างสรรค์เราจึงนำแนวคิดนี้มาเป็นฐานมั่นในการสร้างผลงานต่างๆในช่วงเวลา3ปีนี้ครับนอกจากนั้นเรายังทำละครที่เป็นละครเวทีเต็มรูปแบบในโรงเรียนต่างๆเมื่อละครกับการศึกษาคือสิ่งเดียวกันการเรียนรู้เกี่ยวกับศิลปะการละครสามารถพัฒนาสติปัญญาความฉลาดทางอารมณ์เป็นเครื่องมือฝึกฝนให้ผู้เรียนรู้จักการจัดการกับสถานการณ์เฉพาะหน้ารวมถึงการเผชิญหน้ากับรูปแบบชีวิตต่างๆที่อยู่ในโลกจำลองของละครเพื่อเตรียมพร้อมรับมือกับโลกแห่งความเป็นจริงงานละครโรงเรียนจึงไม่ใช่เป็นแค่การซ้อมละครเพื่อให้ท่องจำและกลับบ้านแต่งานละครต้องเอื้อให้เด็กได้ฝึกตนตระหนักรู้ตาดูหูฟังใจสัมผัสพร้อมกับรู้จักสถานการณ์และโลกรอบตัวเพื่อเป็นการเรียนรู้ตลอดชีวิตได้ดังนั้นแนวทางการทำงานของ Cherry Theater จึงสร้างสรรค์และมีเป้าหมายให้ผู้เรียนได้ส่งเสริมตัวเองดังนี้เรื่องความคิดสร้างสรรค์ความสามารถที่จะตั้งคำถามและเป็นนักค้นคว้าการวิพากษ์วิจารณ์การยอมรับความคิดเห็นและเสนอความคิดการสื่อสารฝึกสื่อสารความคิดของตัวเองไปยังกลุ่มโดยฝึกจากการเป็นผู้ฟังและฝึกฝนจากการเป็นนักถ่ายทอดที่สื่อสารรู้เรื่องการร่วมมือกันละครเป็นโลกจำลองในการทำงานร่วมกันได้รู้จักหน้าที่บทบาทระหว่างตัวเองกับสังคมละครจึงเป็นพื้นที่ปลอดภัยที่ให้เด็กได้ฝึกฝนการแก้ปัญหาอย่างไม่โดดเดี่ยวเพราะพวกเขาจะช่วยกันแก้ปัญหาแบบร่วมด้วยช่วยกันทำให้เด็กๆได้เรียนรู้การยอมรับซึ่งกันและกันมองเห็นความแตกต่างมองเห็นว่าเราตัวคนเดียวไม่สามารถเก่งได้ทุกเรื่องแต่ต้องร่วมมือกันช่วยกันต่อยอดแล้วถึงรอดได้เรียนรู้วิธีให้จุดแข็งของตัวเองไปอุดจุดอ่อนของคนอื่นและยอมรับให้จุดแข็งของคนอื่นมาเสริมจุดอ่อนของตัวเองเมื่อซ้อมละครไปเรื่อยพวกเขาจะเริ่มเข้าใจว่าตัวเองไม่ได้อยู่คนเดียวบนโลกเพราะมนุษย์โลกรอดได้เพราะเราต่างช่วยเหลือกัน ปีที่แล้วเราทำงานกับนักวิจัยที่สนใจเรื่องของสิทธิเสรีภาพอะไรบางอย่างของเด็กไร้สัญชาตินะครับเราได้มีโอกาสได้ทำเรื่องมหาสมุทรสุดขอบฝันที่มีเด็กๆเมียนมาเขมรเด็กๆที่เป็นมอญนะครับเราใช้กระบวนการละครสร้างสรรค์ละครประยุกต์เนี่ยในการดึงศักยภาพอะไรบางอย่างของเขาให้เขามีโอกาสได้พูดได้สื่อสารสิ่งที่เขาอยากจะพูดทำให้เขาตระหนักรู้ถึงสิทธิอะไรบางอย่างที่เขาติดตัวมาตั้งแต่เด็กนอกจากนี้ก่อนที่จะเกิดเหตุการณ์โรคระบาดขึ้นมาเชอรี่เธียเตอร์เนี่ยมีโครงการที่เรียกว่าเป็น learning through the season หรือโครงการเรียนรู้ผ่านฤดูกาลโดยเราไปทำงานกับชุมชนที่อำเภอบางเลนนครชัยศรีแล้วเราก็ได้วางเอาไว้ว่าตลอดทั้งปีเนี่ยในแต่ละฤดูกาลเนี่ยเด็กๆจะสามารถเรียนรู้อะไรผ่านกระบวนการของละครสร้างสรรค์แล้วก็การสร้างงานศิลปะภายในชุมชนได้โดยเริ่มต้นจากฤดูร้อนเราคิดธีมที่เรียกว่า Rhythm in Summerร้อนของประเทศไทยของเราเนี่ยเป็นฤดูที่มีความสนุกสนานคึกคักเป็นการเปิดฤดูกาลของชีวิตใหม่เราไปค้นพบกับศิลปินในชุมชนที่ตีกลองที่เรียกว่าเป็นกลองยาวเราก็ค้นพบว่าเด็กๆสามารถเกิดการเรียนรู้จังหวะจากโคนชีวิตชุมชนผ่านกลองยาวทำให้เด็กๆได้มีโอกาสได้เรียนรู้จังหวะจากโคนของชีวิตได้เรียนรู้จังหวะจากโคนของชุมชนซึ่งเป็นสื่อศิลปะที่ทำให้เด็กรู้สึกสนุกแล้วก็มีจินตนาการแล้วก็สร้างสรรค์งานของตัวเองได้โดยตอนท้ายเนี่ยเด็กๆจะนำความรู้ที่เขาได้เนี่ยเล่าเรื่องผ่านนิทานและจังหวะจากโคนโดยที่เขาออกแบบทั้งริทึมและ storytelling ของตัวเองในตอนท้ายเด็กคนนั้นไวดังมากก็มีหมูป่าเข้ามาเนี่ยมันเป็นการสื่อสารและเป็นการสะท้อนแล้วก็สังเคราะห์สิ่งที่เขาเรียนรู้มาตลอด3 วัน 2 คืนที่เราได้เข้าค่ายละครนี้กันขึ้นมาพอหลังจากที่เราเจอกับสถานการณ์โควิดนะครับแล้วก็ค้นพบว่าแบบไอ้ active relationship เนี่ยมันก็เปลี่ยนหน้าเปลี่ยนตาไปอีกทำให้เราต้องเจอกับภาวะเขาเรียกว่าเป็น relationship บนจอเนาะแต่คราวนี้เนี่ยในช่วงการระบาดครั้งแรกแล้วก็ครั้งที่2ของประเทศไทยเนี่ยครับเราก็เลยออกแบบกิจกรรมที่เรียกว่าเป็นละครสวนขวดนะครับหรือที่เรียกว่าละครterrarium theater เนาะซึ่งอันเนี้ยเราบูรณาการข้ามศาสตร์จากการทำสวนขวดที่มันเป็นการเรียนรู้ที่เกี่ยวกับวิทยาศาสตร์สิ่งแวดล้อมระบบนิเวศนะครับกลายเป็นการเรียนรู้แบบเชื่อมโยงแบบศิลปะเนาะแล้วก็ผ่านกิจกรรมละครสร้างสรรค์ซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยให้เด็กๆได้สร้างฉากของตัวเองในสวนขวดแล้วก็ได้ออกแบบเลือกตัวละครแล้วก็ให้พวกเขาเนี่ยเล่าเรื่องนะครับด้นสดนะผ่านกิจกรรมด้นสดเล่าไปแล้วก็มีการเว้นระยะห่างมีการทำงานร่วมกันเนี่ยนะครับนอกจากว่าพวกเขาจะได้เพลิดเพลินจากศิลปะแล้วเขาจะได้มองถึงมุมความงามการเล่าละครเรื่องต่างๆที่มันเชื่อมกันระหว่างโลกแต่ละใบของตัวเองนะครับซึ่งเมื่อการที่เราเล่าเรื่องโลกของตัวเองเนี่ยก็จะมองเห็นโลกของคนอื่นด้วยไอ้นิทานทุกๆเรื่องจากละครสวนขวดเนี่ยมันก็เชื่อมกันนะครับซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยมันเป็นการจัดการตัวเองกับสภาพสังคมที่เปลี่ยนแปลงอย่างรวดเร็วและตัวของสวนขวดเนี่ยมันก็จะทำให้เด็กๆเรียนรู้เกี่ยวกับวัฏจักรของชีวิตเนาะว่าทุกอย่างมันมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงการเกิดการสิ้นสุดของชีวิตนะครับดังนั้นเชอรี่เธียเตอร์เราก็จะพัฒนาตัวเองอยู่เรื่อยๆแล้วเราก็ค้นพบว่าสถานการณ์บนโลกของเราวันนี้เนี่ยมันคือการเปลี่ยนแปลงมากๆดังนั้นโรงละครจึงอยู่ได้ทุกที่ไม่เว้นแม้แต่ที่บ้านหรือว่าของเล่นเล็กๆที่อยู่กับเด็กเองแล้วเชอรี่เธียเตอร์ก็เชื่อว่าเราก็จะรับมือกับสถานการณ์การเปลี่ยนแปลงนี้อย่างเต็มที่แล้วก็มีความหวังขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะพี่เบิร์ตรีรู้สึกว่าดูวิดีโอแล้วเห็นแต่รอยยิ้มของเด็กๆแล้วดู ก่อนที่โควิดจะมาเนาะทุกคนดูแบบเต็มที่มากแต่ว่าน่าสนใจมากที่Cherry Theater ก็ปรับตัวเองแล้วก็เป้ชอบที่คอนเซิร์นหลักของงานพี่เบิร์ดมันคือว่าเราจะหา learning format อันไหนเนาะที่จะทำให้เด็กๆไปต่อได้แล้วก็เหมือนกับ survive ในอนาคตซึ่งอนาคตมันมีแต่เหมือนจะยุ่งเหยิงขึ้นซับซ้อนเรื่อยๆอะค่ะแล้วก็รู้สึกว่ามันก็เลยทำให้ Cherry Theater ไม่หยุดอยู่แค่ฟอร์มของเทเตอร์แต่ไปจับกับดนตรีชุมชนหรือว่ากระทั่งจนมาถึงเทอราเรียมก็เลยรู้สึกว่าอันนี้เป็นยังไงดีเป็นก้าวต่อไปที่น่าติดตามว่าแล้วในหลังจากนี้ถ้าโควิดหมดไปหรือไม่หมดไปจากเทอราเรียมเราจะไปไหนกันต่อกับ Cherry Theater นะคะก็เป็นกำลังใจให้แล้วก็รอดูรอยยิ้มของเด็กๆที่จะมาจากโรงเรียนพี่เบิร์ดนะคะ
ครับขอบคุณครับปูเป้ครับ
ค่ะโอเคค่ะ So that's Terrarium Theater and Cherry Theater from Thailand, from Bert Bunpong. We go next to our next speaker, Alfredo Zinola. Alfredo is an Italian performer, choreographer, and dancer based in Germany, whose TYA work has a focus on questioning the body with children. He has previously presented his work primo in Bangkok at BICT. It was a contemporary dance performance in a large pool on stage, a work that aims to rethink dance performance for children. And in response to the current global situation, Alfredo is not letting the pandemic stop his relationship with the public. He switches his work into schools instead of theaters, which has to close. And he's bringing this model titled Other World to work in Thailand with Kangye of B-Floor Theater Thailand, which will be presented in Big Fest 2021 in November as well. I give the stage now to Alfredo, please.
Hello. Yeah, here's Alfredo Zinola. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, Pupe, she said already a lot. Yeah, so I'm a choreographer and a performer, and I'm inventing performances for children that deals with this public since 8 years. Yeah, and through the years, what I understood is that almost without knowing, or let's say thanks to COVID, I realized it, I developed a method of how to create works that is based on interaction with children. Yeah, and then COVID came and I realized that it wasn't that easy to meet children. So we decided to switch or to change our way of work. I say our because I normally work also with other colleagues into schools, because schools, although in the moments where they're closed, were the places where it was more simple and more easy to find children. The first work I've developed is Other World, and is a site-specific work meant for a classroom. And as Pupe says already, the reason why I'm also here probably is also because we are going to start a new production based on a research that we did on a school for BICT Festival together with Kage, Theeravat, Mulvilai. Yeah, maybe it's good to say a few words about Other World. So Other World has the goal to challenge what the daily space of a classroom can be. What I realized, at least in Germany, is that I saw many dance performances happening in school places, placing or stitching in it a theater performance, never taking enough in account what a space of a school would be. So what interests me there was how can I be aware of what a school or a classroom is practically, and what is the behavior of children in relationship to the objects, to the room itself. And how can I challenge it by offering different perception of the same space, by creating an aesthetic experience, because is what I'm trying to do always in theaters. So what happened, or what came out then, is Other World. Maybe since it's already 50 minutes that we're speaking, we would first show a video of the performance so that you can see a bit, then maybe I say a few words and I go further. Yeah, please. Thank you. This one was the trailer of Otherworld, and I show it because it's good to watch some videos sometimes also and not hear me always speaking. And also because there you see two topics, for example, that can be very easily to realize that we worked on. When we were researching in the school, we realized that a classroom is a place where you use things very, very simply and very practically. So when, for example, a child would arrive in a school, would take the chair and move it to sit on it. So when we worked on the choreography, we thought the first thing we're going to do is to not touch the object and to not ask the people to sit on the chairs, to play with that and to change with that. So this is why, for example, you see that we started with those little movements. And another thing that can be also interesting related to the music that you heard too, is that we realize that often a classroom is a very boring space. Because I mean, is just one room where you're spending like 1 year of your life. For this reason, we realized that it was so important also to play with the music that would offer a rhythm and keep it up somehow. Yeah, so this one to say a few things about Otherworld, but actually this was just a way to start, because yeah, so let's say I think what can be interesting when we think about learning through play and how we do relate with the COVID pandemic and what solutions we found and our idea to work in schools, this relates maybe a little bit more in general to what my work is and about, as I said, some tools that I developed on how to create a performance. So my work is often labeled as a dance performance for children, as I said, meaning that the biggest part of the audience that comes to see the show normally are children. And I personally find it a bit problematic saying that I create performances for children because I don't know who those kids are. Because very often I have the feeling that doing performances for children seems to imply having certain assumption about children's behavior or their reaction about certain topics. For example, thinking, I know that children likes jumping, or I know that children will get scared of the darkness. There is definitely something true, and there's certainly also something very false in it, because it's a pre-assumption as a generalization. In order to avoid falling in the pre-assumption that I, or in general the society might have, when starting a new piece, I confront myself with the question, what is a child? And since it's very difficult to ask to all the children of my city, who are them and what do they think about the topic I would like to work on it, I developed some tools of zooming in and zooming out in order to play with that. And this is what I applied, and this is the reason why I went to schools to work. So when I say zooming in, it means that in order to deconstruct my personal pre-assumption, so this idea, I know that children will relate like this, or I know the children, who are those kids. So in order to deconstruct that, I reduce my possible audience to a small group of real persons that I invite from the beginning of a production to join the rehearsals. My goal there is mainly to see their reaction to the topic I'm interested in, not to please them, so not in order to do what they want to do, what they want to see, but to build my subjective interpretation. This brings to many discoveries. For example, there's a piece we have developed before the pandemic called Pelle, that is an interactive dance piece about body and contact. I developed it with Michaela Kuhn, and we discovered that the biggest problem in making an adult body accessible for a kid to be touched, because we wanted that the kids would touch the performer and move them, was how to transmit that a body should be touched in a gentle way instead of a rough touch. So instead of protecting the kids from the adult, as we would have the first thing thought about pre-assumption, we actually discovered that what we had to do, it was to do the opposite. Like, how do we manage to protect the artist from the kids? So this is an example of this zooming in, but then there is the performance. And there is where I use the tool, as what I said, a practice of zooming out. So specifically in performances for your young audience, it is common to label the entrance for a certain age group. For example, 2 to 5 years old. But what about the rest of the people? Should we leave them out? When we created a performance, another one in 2016 with Maxwell McCarthy called Party, that is also an interactive dance performance, we first thought that the piece would be for kids 6+. but we didn't think that a family that has a child that is 6 years old very probably will have also another child that is 3 or 4. And very probably, if they will come to theater, they will come probably with some adults. So there is where we understood that a practice of involvement would be needed, because if you want to put a bouncer at the entrance, there will be, if you don't want to do it, I mean, there will be always what I called an unexpected audience. And I think it's vital to welcome them. So for example, for party, we understood that we had to develop some strategies on how to involve this unexpected audience. So for a little child, for example, we understood that if they would come at 3 years old, then we would have to have some movement slower just for them in order to invite them to join the performance. And for parents, we understood that we had to create a strategy to facilitate their presence in the performance by sitting and watching them. So playing also with their perception of how a performance can be for children. Yeah, so these are like some example of one tool, I would say, of why for me was so important to stay in school and to keep this contact to some of kids. I wouldn't say to the kids, but to some of them. And I think it's still a very open process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfredo. I think it's super interesting that you're questioning the definitions of what performances for children can be and really going to kind of hands-on deconstructing and critiquing and rethinking and really showing the children and even, you know, the parents and the school, the space itself, and kind of mix and blur all these definitions together. So it becomes kind of, I think, exciting. And even the children in the process might also be, you know, thinking and critiquing their own relationship to things themselves, you know, sitting with you or watching you perform. So thanks for bringing this practice and thinking to us in this webinar. I will move down to our last presentation from Adrian Hernandez and Jose Aguero of Teatro El Vacío, a Mexican-Argentinian company. Adrian and Jose are deeply connected with the Latin American TYA network and work with different age groups of children. Adrian and Jose will talk today about theater and play as the space for creative development for children and the importance of such a space, especially in the times of pandemic. They have been recreating these imaginative and creative actions in other spaces outside of theater, and they will also be talking about their provocation, which is artistic experience to be thought of as an essential part of children's well-being and healthy development. So Adrian and Jose, if you're ready, please take the stage away.
Hi, hello. I would like to say that we are so happy to be here sharing with you all. And well, he is Jose, I am Adrian, and we are Teatro El Vacío. We are a binational company, Mexico, Argentina. To introduce, I would like to ask administrator to put the video, please. This video is better without sound because I would like to talk and introduce ourselves, and the video shows a little about our scenic proposal. And while the video runs, we would like to share some ideas, some reflections that we have been thinking in these times that we all in the world we are living. So let's go.
We offer significant alternative artistic proposals with and for children and young people. Our creation processes seek to incorporate children and young people under the premise that the proposals we offer are a space for intergenerational dialogue and participation. Our work's main objective is to guarantee children's rights to art and culture, as well as respect for diversity and inclusion. At Teatro al Vacío, we think the education as the process that allows us to give meaning to existing. In this way, all the experiences we have throughout life can educate us, transform us. Theater is one of those experiences. Theater is experience. The theater gives us the possibility of experiencing going outside the perimeter of the known, observing, discovering, and acting in and with the unknown. For us, theater is art and play. Art and play are founding experiences that generate meaning. Since the birth, human beings, through playing and art, discovered the universe in which we are immersed, and we identify our capacities and possibilities to transform reality. Maria Emilia Lopez, an Argentine educator and researcher, says, art, like play, is the usual break with what is known. All aesthetic perceptions leaves its mark on us. The fact that art is a place of experience means that children and adults learn something more about ourselves and about the world, in addition to being moved or enjoying ourselves. Nobody returns from the encounter with the art without some emotional, aesthetic, subjective, or cognitive gain, or all of them together. Theater is an experience that offers people, in this case, children and young people, the possibility of being interpreters, translators, and creators of meanings in a space for conviviality of meeting with others. Being a spectator of a scenic experience makes it possible to put knowledge and emotions into play, express oneself, and think critically. In theater in particular, and in art in general, events of particular experimentation and appropriation take place. We could distinguish three special moments that happen in a significant scenic experience: observation, appreciation, and expression.
Observing allows us to stop, contemplate what is happening, recognize it, think about it, question it. Observing leads to creating mental images and storing information in perception that will allow inferring in other circumstances, properties of things, feelings, etc. Also, from what we observe, associations arise, and thought and imagination are set in motion. Observation implies care, intentionality. It is linked to contemplation, which, far from being passive, as one might superficially suppose, mobilizes all the senses and cognitive functions, including the emotions. Appreciation adds to what is observed the sensitive of the observer. It means that each spectator lives the experience from his particular sensitivity. The appreciation of the scenic event is a subjective fact where the sensitivity of each child or young spectator is put into play. With the expression, children and young people generate their own playful and artistic manifestations, which makes them co-creators of an experience. With the expression, children and young people expand their wisdom and recognize that they are capable to transforming themselves because something of themselves goes out into the world and can be shared with others. So we can think that a scenic experience is a meaningful experience which allows children and young people to get excited, move, express themselves, and reflect. A ritual space-time that promotes symbolization processes that help to understand the world in which they live, to question it and transform it. According to Barbara Collin, German creator and researcher, we must understand theater as a place created by people to share feelings, thoughts, experiences with other people, and the place where we are going to feel part of a community. From this perspective, we consider it important that theater offers children and young people the possibility of being part of an experience that invites them to participate reflectively, see themselves seeing others, and feel themselves feeling others. Theater can be a space to meet and disagree, question and self-question, a tool that allows us to become critical and participatory citizens. Children and adults can dialogue through artistic experiences, make discoveries about who they are, and consolidate vehicles to create a more equitable, plural, and diverse society. Children in lockdown are an extraordinary situation in our societies, and it is urgent to reflect on how the preventive isolation measures on the coronavirus affected and affect children. The wishes, autonomies, and rights of the children were suspended. Their emotions and expectations relegated into the midst of the vertiginous, chaotic world and uncertainty about the immediate future. Children need space of freedom as an indispensable part of healthy development. Freedom to explore the world and move cannot wait for children, even in a pandemic context. The experience of virtuality can be a possibility, of course, although in no way does it replace the experience produced by shared presences in a face-to-face encounter. the presence of bodies, proximia, and relationships that are established in coexistence with all living and non-living beings are essential to recognize our own being. If we look for possibilities in the territory of presence, perhaps it is time to ask ourselves some questions. How to make artistic experiences belong fully to all the people who are part of our communities? How can artistic experience be a fundamental part of children's lives, as well as food, health, and education? What proposals can we think of so that artistic experiences stimulate the creative capacity and symbolic constructions that children contribute to social and community practices? What kind of devices and practices can we imagine to continue producing stage events as a zone of shared experience? For us, theater is and will be an experience of bodies that share poetic time and space. In these encounters of presence bodies, the gazes of actors and spectators meet to recognize each other as humans, to confirm a shared existence. The type of experience that coexistence generates and the present body is not substitutable. Coexistence is something very powerful in us because it is in the memory of the human. It was born with human. So we understand the possibility of the encounter in all its forms as an act of resistance against a humanity that lives in an increasingly complex reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian and Jose. I think it's a very important provocation how you propose whether or not we can make art and theater essential for children, just like we do with healthcare and food. And this question, I think it wasn't an easy question to start with even before the pandemic, but right now it's even a more important question now because children are being deprived of this space that you call the space of freedom, where they can take, and create meanings for themselves and connect to their surroundings and make sense of their own existence. So we are even being limited of these spaces now for children. So this question and the provocation that you propose becomes even bigger now and even more significant. And I think something that everybody is probably really concerned and thinking about, because children many times are missing from the conversation, pandemic related in many areas around the world. So unfortunately, so thank you for bringing up that very, very significant provocation from where you are. All right. So I would encourage our audience now, if you have any questions, we already have 2 questions in the Q&A box. I would dive into them. And then if you have more, feel free to raise your hand or put more questions in the Q&A. You can also like the question that's already there in the case that you agree with the questions, that you won't have to repeat them. So if all speakers could turn on your cameras, if you'd like, so we could be in the stage, this virtual stage together. And we see you all again. All right. So the first question is not directed to any particular speaker. So maybe if any of you would like to respond to this, I think you can feel free to do so. The question is, what does the interaction among the students look like? Okay, I think this is directed to probably Alfredo, because you work with school children. So what is the interaction among the students when you prepare or in the process of the preparation of your performance? And how does the critical and creative dialogue go? What is the role of the facilitator during those sessions? And is it effective as an activity for that transformation and growth? So I guess the question is really about when you actually put it out there in practice, what happens, in a space? Yeah.
I took some notes. Thank you for the question. I had to take some notes to be able to answer everything. So I guess the first question was about the interaction and what does it happen with interaction with that? And for me, it's also, yeah, very related to the second one, the question about the dialogue, about the creative things. As I said before, for me, it's very subjective, the way I work with them. So I do believe that different figures should have different roles in the school, specifically talking with the school or with the education process. So I think that the teacher should be responsible for explaining things. I think that as an artist, I'm using the possibilities of interacting with children mainly to create or to build up my own perception of how they deal with the topic. So let's say my goal there is not to educate them about a topic, but like to share my questions and to take from there. Probably, or let's say from our experience, then maybe some teacher are interested then to facilitate other activities around to, let's say, to develop further some of the topic we raise. To take it also very practically, like when I speak about subjective things, for example, with Other World, we were working in the classroom and I wanted to do something with chairs. So we said, okay, first we don't touch them. And then we said, let's touch it. Let's do something with those chairs. And we decided to do, I don't know how to say it in English, eine Haufen, it's in Deutsch, like a mass of chairs, like one over the other. And I did it once in the afternoon where while this one was happening, the children were like playing outside because it was already out of the lesson. One child opened the door and saw it. And he was like, oh, what are you doing? When you're finished, put everything in place, please. And I was like, this is very good. I'm going to do it for sure. Because I realized there, okay, what I'm doing actually is touching a topic or something that like creates like a burning of something. You ask also about the role of the facilitator, and in there, humbly, I would raise maybe in anthropology they speak about the participant observer. So the observer that is still participant, so that has an empathy with his surrounding. And when I think on how I deal with my public, so that is in a school or that is in a workshop, I'm more keen to be closer to that image. So I'm observing, being aware that I'm always interpreting through my eyes. So I will try never to say that after meeting 30 kids in a school, I will never say the kids are distressed if I'm moving chairs, but I can say that those kids in that moment had this reaction. Research. Performance. The performance has a play with chairs. And there I'm trying to find always a way that to the different publics I'm finding, I will find a way that this becomes interesting for them. Is a slightly thing, but it's for me very crucial, because on one thing you are creating your own assumption, and there I try to be as subjective as possible. On the other one, you're finishing a performance, and there you're trying to find the way to be as welcoming as possible to the broadest audience as possible. And then there was a last question that was about the effectiveness, and there I must say I have some big problem with effectiveness, specifically with this word. Because I'm not effective, and I try not to be, or at least I would say it's quite difficult. I would say specifically with our work, talking about this topic, because in schools we are very often confronted with being effective and like, why do you do art? if it's not good to learn how it's 2 plus 2 is 4, why do I do it? No. And I do think that there is something that maybe cannot be that calculated, that still is valuable. So probably you meant something else. But yeah, I just find it a little bit slippery. So I would say if I'm talking about goals or objective, it's always for me subjective. So what I'm looking for is like to made up my idea on how those people react to that. And for them, I must say I don't take a responsibility of what they will do with that, let's say. I really wish that during a research, so I'm talking about research, during the research, they will take something of that, and that the experience and the meeting with me, it will probably bring something, because it's definitely something unconventional. But I will not try to set an objective on their reaction. For the performance, yes, my objective is that functions with them and touches somehow something. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So I guess the word effectiveness is really kind of, it can be rethought also now, it can be redefined, and it might not have to be like hitting the goals, because if you set the goals, then you're probably not allowing the space for the transformation and growth that should take place in this like uncertain or undefined journey. So yeah, thank you. I think I would go to the third question that is directed to Gemma, and then we can come back to the second question where we can ask all speakers again. So a question from Monsak for Gemma is that if kids make decision to choose the same character, such as they all want to be the main character at the same time, what will be the function of audio play that will engage with them to get involved in the whole story, and in which way? Yeah, so what happens if they all want to be this one person and nobody plays it?
No. The way that our software is built guides kids through, so they do actually have to all select a different character. So that has the potential to create some micro arguments between children going, but I want to be this character. But ultimately they won't be able to proceed through to the story unless all of the characters are filled. And that's also to do with the fact that as they play the story, we give them instructions how to move, which is all choreographed. So one child might be asked to go and get a blanket and the other gets chairs, and then together they create the spaceship, for instance. So for us, it's important that all of those roles are covered, because the physical activity is created by all characters playing their role. So yeah, we've just built in a mechanism within the software to kind of go, nah, everyone has to be a different character. So sort it out amongst yourselves and then we'll start, kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's already a conversation and connection even before they get into the play, because they have to negotiate, or otherwise nobody gets to play, right?
Exactly. So it's like, sort that out, guys.
Strategy. Yeah. All right, thank you then. I'm going to come to the second question from Kip Jagan. I think I would like to direct these questions especially to Bird and Takashi, because I think it's quite common for Thai children, or children maybe in Asia, that children are many times they're shy, they're not super expressive, and they are kind of trained or taught to wait for instruction to comply to, and they believe that their role is to listen and do things as prescribed. And what do you do about this? As the question says, lack of critical and creative thinking, how do you encourage them to be expressive in your work? So either Takashi or Bird. Yeah, Takashi.
Maybe I can share my experience, because I can resonate so much with this conformity and waiting for the clear instruction. And I struggled when I came to the UK, because the education system is very different, and then they encourage sort of individual voice and opinion, and I found that maybe I don't have any personality, and I just needed to keep reminding self that it's okay. It's not about making mistake. It is about what you think and how you think. And like when I work with Japanese children, I have to keep reminding them that it is not about getting it right or wrong. It is about what you want to think, what you want to make. So just keep, it's tiring, but keep giving them permission.
Yeah, keep telling them that it's all right.
And I think the ways of exploring the ways of questioning, what kind of question kind of is efficient for them to unlock that barrier, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of good questions that work, Takashi?
So instead of like, if I ask them, how do you feel? They just say, I'm happy. But then I go specific. So in which moment did you feel happy? Or why why did it make you happy? Or like, if it's happy, what kind of color it is, for example, what kind of sound it makes. So it really breaks down, then maybe stay with sort of sensory experience.
That's perfect. Thank you. I'd like to go to Bird now. พี่เบิร์ดคะเด็กๆที่เขินและรอคำสั่งเราช่วยเหลือเขายังไงคะ
คือต้องบอกก่อนว่าวิธีหลักๆเลยคือมันต้องสร้างพื้นที่ปลอดภัยให้กับเขาก่อนอันนี้คือสำคัญที่สุดคือการสร้างพื้นที่ปลอดภัยแล้วให้เขารู้สึกว่าพื้นที่แห่งนี้มันเป็นพื้นที่ที่เขาจะสามารถทำอะไรก็ได้เมื่อครูที่เป็น facilitator เนี่ยเข้าใจตรงนี้ปุ๊บแล้วเนี่ย mindset ของการที่เขาจะเป็นผู้สั่งหรือว่า mindset ของการที่เขาจะต้องให้เด็กทำอย่างงู้นอย่างนี้เนี่ยจะเปลี่ยนไปเขาคือเพื่อนของเด็กและปลอดภัยดังนั้นเนี่ยเราจะเห็นที่อย่างประเทศไทยของเราเนี่ยการสร้างพื้นที่วงกลมที่เป็น circle แบบ make a circle เราทำน้อยมากเราจะเห็นว่าเวลาเราเข้าเสาธงเราก็จะเห็นว่าเด็กจะยืนเป็นแถวแล้วทุกคนก็จะแบบว่ามุ่งไปสู่เซ็นเตอร์ตรงกลางซึ่งตรงนี้เนี่ยเด็กก็จะคุ้นเคยกับทุกๆวันที่เขาต้องทำสิ่งนี้แต่วิชาที่มันเป็นวงกลมน้อยมากแล้วเด็กก็จะเข้าใจพื้นที่ของการสร้างวงกลมน้อยมากดังนั้นพื้นที่ปลอดภัยจึงสำคัญที่สุดหลังจากที่พื้นที่ปลอดภัยเสร็จปุ๊บแล้วเนี่ยทำยังไงก็ได้ให้เด็กสามารถพูดออกมาตะโกนออกมาแดนซ์ระบำซึ่งคุณทาเคชิกับหลายๆท่านเนี่ยทำอันนั้นอยู่แล้วเมื่อไหร่ก็ตามที่เด็กสามารถจะกางแขนกางขาตะโกนออกมาครีเอทีฟเขาก็จะเปิดซึ่งกระบวนการเหล่านี้มันก็จะสร้างให้ประสาทสัมผัสตาดูหูฟังใจสัมผัสหลังจากนั้นจินตนาการก็จะออกพอจินตนาการก่อปุ๊บเขาก็จะกล้าเคลื่อนไหวพอเขากล้าเคลื่อนไหวเสร็จปุ๊บเขาก็จะกล้าพูดกล้าทำกล้าเล่นละครด้นสดจนกระทั่งถึงการวิพากษ์วิจารณ์การพูดคุยกันผมว่าทุกอย่างมันอยู่รวมกันทั้งหมดแล้วมันไปด้วยกันดังนั้นการสร้างพื้นที่ปลอดภัยคืออันดับแรกที่เราทุกคนจะต้องกลับมามองกันอีกครั้งครับ
แสดงว่ามันไม่ใช่เรื่องของว่าเด็กที่ไหนมีนิสัยอย่างไรเนาะใช่ไหมคะเหมือนกับพี่เบิร์ดเชื่อว่าถ้าพื้นที่มันอนุญาตแล้วเขารู้สึกว่าเขาได้รับคำอนุญาตนั้นอย่างแท้จริงอย่างจริงใจเนี่ยความสามารถในการแสดงออกมันจะออกมาได้เองใช่ไหม
ใช่อย่างที่ทำกับอาจารย์ปาวลักษณ์ที่ตอนนั้นทำเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของเด็กที่ไร้สัญชาติอย่างเงี้ยเด็กก็ไม่กล้าพูดเด็กก็จะอยู่กับอย่างนี้เลยแล้วก็เขาเองเขาก็ไม่มั่นใจในตัวเองอยู่แล้วเพราะว่าเขาก็ไม่สามารถคอนเฟิร์มว่าตัวเองคือไทยหรือเมียนมาหรือจะเป็นอะไรอย่างเงี้ยเซสชั่นแรกเราคือให้พื้นที่ห้องนี้เมื่อไหร่ก็ตามที่เข้ามาในห้องนี้ให้เขารู้สึกนี่มันคือโลกของเราถ้าเด็กรู้สึกได้สบายและคนทำกิจกรรมแล้วเด็กเองก็จะรู้สึกว่ากล้าพูดกล้าทำมากขึ้นครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะชัดเจนมากเลยค่ะทั้งจากพี่เบิร์ดทั้งทาเคชินะคะ so thank you for those questions I think you've given really clear answers as to the simple steps that you can take to start building that kind of space for the children. The next question again from Kitchakan. I think I'd like to give this to Teatro Alvasio, Adrian, and Jose, because you've talked a bit about this. That how do you link the experience of the participants? I think that in this case, children, your participants, to the situation outside, so in their real life, real world. How do you make the on-stage realization of possibilities count in the real world? Do you have any direct experience that you can share with us about that?
Okay, well, we think that in one point, we have a limit in the scene. I think that we believe and we hope that the experience is is truly meaningful, and that this experience go with them and accompany them, the children. A meaningful experience transcends the space, time of the theatrical event. And I mean, in theater, in this time, in this space, we really try to see them, to hear them. And this is, in fact, an experience that sometimes they don't have in their lives. It is really strong. It's hard, but this is the reality for some children, and we really hope and think that the experience that we try to offer, and the experience that they they received go with them, and in this way, with this experience, they can distinguish the different situations and how they feel about that. And I think that it is very important. I hope I am clear.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what you're saying is that the space of theater, of performance, is the time where facilitators or artists like you and also the other present participants here make it the most memorable and meaningful for children, so much so that they take away whatever experience or memory or feelings that happened in this space to their own world as well. So it's not about giving skills and toolkits and skill set or anything that they can take and use like objects, but it's more, I think the experience or the transformative memory that they would be carrying with them even outside the theater spaces, right? Yeah, that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. The next question is really interesting. I think we have this question to think about everywhere in theater, not just the TYA communities, but how do you make whatever we build in a project sustainable? Because projects end, right? Projects have a limited time. And for the growth to continue, how do we make this happen in a sustainable, and also the educational side of it as well? Anybody would like to respond to that? Do you have problems with short projects having end? Yeah, Gemma.
I'll jump in. I mean, sustainability can mean so many different things, depending on if we're talking financial sustainability and the economic viability of different companies, or, like I think about single one-off projects that I experienced as a child, and I can still remember very crisply what that felt like, or the imagery that was created and the impact that has, 30 years later. So in some instances, short projects, whilst they may not feel like they have longevity, they actually do, in terms of how well they impact the audience and what carries through for those audience members, whether they go out into the world to become creative practitioners or just, even in their everyday lives, that can shape the way that you think about possibilities in any industry, kind of thing. But I do think that there is a bigger conversation, which all of the panelists have touched on in one way or another, around the value of this work with children tends to kind of focus on those intangible skills. And that's really important, but it's also very difficult to quantify, and it's very difficult to argue the value of that in a world that is so empirically driven about how well you're going to efficiently achieve all of your requirements for an education space. So I think it's also about how we change that conversation with educators and the arts community around having language and research that support the importance of the skills around imagination and creativity and play, so that then you can see more validation of this type of work from various funding sources that allows it to be more sustainable in terms of a financial, allowing people to actually have money to be able to work and do this work with children, because it is so important.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. I can see how you think about, it's not just the artist and the performing art spaces, no, it's also the ecology that surrounds it that will help to build the sustainability in question, whether it be research or funding bodies, or how the community would take it away, not just in this space, but also afterwards, and how it lives in other people's areas and thinking as well. Thank you. Not sure if other people would like to also respond to this, if you have any related experience. Yes, Alfredo.
Even just repeating what Gemma was saying, but I cannot remember who said it. I remember that one author somewhere was saying about how long does a thing exist, and there is of course the thing that you see, but then a thing exists till there is a memory in someone. So about the resonance of a work, then if it stays for 30 years, then it means that it's definitely very sustainable, because this work then is existing since 30 years, just is existing in the mind of someone and not in the theater of someone. But I cannot quote who said it.
But now we remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
This now will stay in our mind, Alfredo, and we will. Yeah, I think it's quite similar when we talk also about, effectiveness, and all this is about really defining what it means for who, for us, for what goal, no? And then we can think about how to implement it or realize it, these concepts. Okay, then. Another interesting question surrounding working with children are, of course, the parents and teachers. How do you also work with them? I guess it's the question is exactly, it is, how could we deal with parents and other teachers influencing children's transformation once they walk out of our drama exercises? Yeah, I see a lot of nods. If you want to go ahead. พี่เบิร์ดไหมคะต้องทำงานกับผู้ปกครองหรือคุณครูท่านอื่นยังไงบ้างเมื่อเด็กๆมาเจอเราแล้วพอเขาออกไปจากตรงนี้เราจะมั่นใจได้ยังไงว่าสิ่งนี้มันจะไม่ถูกทำลายจะไม่หายไปต้องทำงานกับคนดูแลเด็กๆยังไงไหมคะ
ก็พี่เบิร์ดเริ่มแล้วกันเนาะคือพี่เบิร์ดทำงานกับผู้ปกครองมาโดยตลอดเพราะว่ากิจกรรมของเราเนี่ยมันเป็นกิจกรรมแบบคอนเนคกับผู้ปกครองโดยตรงเช่นละครที่เราไปทำในโรงเรียนอย่างเงี้ยผู้ปกครองก็จะมีความคาดหวังว่าลูกของตัวเองเนี่ยจะได้อยู่บนเวทีเนาะใช่ไหม แต่คราวนี้เนี่ยสิ่งที่เราทำเนี่ยคือเราไม่ได้ทำโปรดักชันอย่างเดียวแต่เราทำ process ด้วยนะครับซึ่ง process หรือกระบวนการระหว่างการทำงานเนี่ยผู้ปกครองเนี่ยเราก็ไม่เห็นเนาะว่าลูกๆที่เขาได้มีโอกาสทำกระบวนการละครหรือกิจกรรมละครเนี่ยก็ได้ประโยชน์ตรงนั้นด้วยอ่ะพี่เบิร์ดยังจำได้เลยว่ามีอยู่โปรดักชันหนึ่งที่เราจะต้องไปดีเฟนต์กับผู้ปกครองว่าคุณอ่ะทำละครเนี่ยแล้วไอ้ละครเนี่ยมันเป็นประโยชน์ยังไงกับลูกของเขาบ้างแล้วแบบทำไมต้องซ้อม ทำไมต้องซ้อมละครก็แค่จำบทแล้วก็มาเล่นเองไม่ได้เหรออะไรอย่างเงี้ยก็มีผู้ปกครองมากมายเต็มไปหมดแล้วก็เราก็ต้องไปดีเฟนต์ตรงนั้นว่าเราไม่ใช่แค่ซ้อมละครอย่างเดียวแต่เรามีกระบวนการมี process ที่จะทำให้เด็กๆเรียนรู้ผ่านละครตรงนั้นได้เราก็ต้องไปชี้แจงเนาะแต่ละอัน1 2 3 4ว่าเรามี pedagogy การเรียนรู้ผ่านละครยังไงซึ่งอย่างบ้านเราอย่างประเทศไทยเนี่ยคนเข้าใจละครในเชิงของความสวยงามโปรดักชันนะแต่อาจจะยังไม่ค่อยเข้าใจโครงสร้างของกระบวนการละครที่มันสามารถสร้างการเรียนรู้ได้อันนี้เราก็ต้องคอยบอกผู้ปกครองแต่เมื่อละครมันพูดออกไปแล้วเนี่ยผ่านแมสเสจต่างๆที่เด็กๆมีโอกาสได้พูดผ่านละครเนี่ยผู้ปกครองก็จะเข้าใจแล้วก็มันก็คุ้มค่ากับการที่เขาได้เรียนรู้ผ่านละครครับประมาณนั้นครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะพี่เบิร์ด so from Bird I'd like to also go to Takashi if you have any thoughts on this yeah please
I think this is very important and also something that challenge that I face but however we also ask parents to do the same thing, go through the same creating process, like making art. And then we find out that actually children are teachers because they have such a, imagination and also sort of, innovative way of thinking and so fluid. And then that was also when the parents noticed that how rigid their thinking were. So one way I think to tackle is to allow parents to go through the same process. And also same thing happened that when I was making this film with stateless children that I asked teachers to also do the same task. And it was fascinating that how they are rigid in their making. And I think also children love that to see the teachers being a bit clumsy and not moving so gracefully like children did. So I think I would say maybe allow adults or teachers, parents to do the same thing and to stand on the same ground rather than trying to see from above.
So also bringing them out of the adult kind of perspective and just get them on the same ground, no? And then
yes, and get crazy and be playful.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a nice proposition. Thank you. I also would like to ask, I'm going to go around everyone, but I have specific perspective I want to take on this question. So for Adrian and Jose, you work with very different age groups. So I'm sure you have different ways and things you have to deal with the parents and teachers of these different age groups when you make performances that involve the children. So anything you'd like to share on that?
Yes. Adults, parents, and teachers always is a team because we work very specifically with children, and we really think that we like to think that we offer time and space to be free and play. And adults, for adults, this is always an exercise. So we need to work with that, and maybe with adults, parents and teachers, we would have to do a work that sensitize the sensibilization to accompany the children in their processes and allowing each one to walk in their own time. Yes.
It's also about including them somehow. And yeah, I think the question really comes from when you see, if you separate them with the children, and then kind of like sending the children to the artist and then sending them back to the parents. But if we don't think about if we don't think that way to start with, then we can probably make this a smoother blend between the parents and the children, right? All right. I'd go to Alfredo, because I think it's interesting that mostly you talk about your work as working with the children and their environment, right, in school or daily life activities. Do you have to encounter also with the children's parents and other teachers? And do you also work with them? And is it any different than what you do with the children?
Yeah. So it definitely works where adults are invited inside. I find it very interesting as a question, and I was trying to put notes. It's like, yeah, it's many different levels. Yeah. So I would say, still from my experience, I think that adults and children are a system that we do not value enough. And I think there is very often a problem. Like, let's say, at least among artists and professionals dealing with performing art, is always a topic, those adults coming to the performance. Make me thinking that maybe the first biggest problem is in the name. Like, we're saying that we do performances for children, but it's never the case. But yeah, if we go then a bit more deep, yeah, I do think that it's very difficult to understand how much are we able to value and to understand what is the system adult-child in each constellations, because you have a teacher and the child, you have a parent and the child, you have like granny and the child, you have the boyfriend of the father and the child. Like, it's many different possibilities, and you have to welcome all of them. So it's definitely always different, but there is always an expectation from you as an artist. We are often very big pre-assumption. The child is not behaving good. This is your problem, because you as teacher, you did it wrong, or you as parent, you did it wrong, or I can see that you're stopping your child, or I can see that you're still talking too much to your child. I can see that you are not talking enough with your child. I see that you don't leave this child playing enough. I see that you leave too much free this child, because we are adults. So we are now, it's like those levels that we're talking about. I wonder if we do mean all the same. I don't know. I can say that I see that there is always an expectation related to adults, and I don't know if this expectation manages to respect enough what this constellation of adult children is bringing, and that is if is able to understand what is the space of the adult in connection to the child. Because maybe in some performances we want that the adult is accompanying a child to watch a performance. So maybe is that I wish that the adult is able to look at the child, looking at the performance. Maybe there are other performances where I do wish that the adult drops his educator role and enjoys the performance as the child. But then there's like also, are you trying to respecting what they are, because they're still together? Like, now it's like, as if you have a boyfriend and a girlfriend coming together in the performance, and you say, I want you to look at it separately, and now you perform that you're going to be the boyfriend of someone else. Like, why?
I can't really actually put that down there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, no, like, what do we expect from them, and are we able to respect what they are bringing? Because they're going to stay with that. Like, they're not dropping it. I mean, instead they will go then on the street, and the child will go under the car. Or so how are we able as artists to be aware of what they are and what they bring, and how are we able to respect that? I don't have a question, but it's definitely a topic that is always different to each work, because it's related to the expectation that you have as an artist. Yeah, maybe do a last short, fast example that is easy. We did this performance party I talked before. There is a party, and we first said the children are inside, the adults stay outside, and stop, because we tried together like to making the pop music dancing to children, adults together. It was like, no, please. The adults were like, mimicking, like be having fun with children, was like, no, please don't do it. We did it. Then after a few performances, we realized that the parents were freaking out outside, not being able to see what was happening inside. And then we understood that the reason was bring the adults inside, mask them, put them a complete costume so that the children will not recognize them, let them watch half of the performance without saying nothing, and after half of the performance where it's clear what it's about, then take off the mask and start to dance with us. And there we understood how it was possible so that they would have a similar experience from different perspectives. It's a work.
That's a great example, very clear and very good tactics, I would say. Yeah. All right. So I would go now to Gemma, because I think the audio play has a really, intriguing but quite different format, because it goes completely out of the theater space itself. Do you still have to maintain or work with this relationship of, parents and children in operating audio play?
Oh, absolutely. With the audio play experience, that relationship between the child and the parent starts well before anyone plays a game, in that there's a negotiation around finding it and whether or not the child is allowed to download it, and whether the parent sees it as a worthy thing to play. Because obviously with online content in any realm, parents should have a healthy skepticism of, what is this experience that I'm inviting into my home? What are the risks associated with it? Because, there are many risks around online content. So there is a negotiation there between the parents and the children. And we find that the nature of that negotiation really changes depending on the age of the child. So obviously younger kids have less agency in that, because their ability to kind of assess risk or kind of find new things in a digital space is very different in terms of their literacy and so on. But then when they get older, then kids have more agency to kind of argue for what they want or put forward ideas, and then it's a negotiation with the parent. But it's an interesting thing. I kind of echo the comments from everyone else around, you kind of need to bring parents into the fold, because everyone is, no matter what age they are, everyone's always a little bit intimidated by doing something different and new. And, so it's kind of getting them to see the value of what that is. And once they've seen it and they've experienced it, or they've seen their kids and how it changes them, or the confidence, or how just how joyful kids can be when they've been through an experience like this, then they viscerally feel the value of that. And so then they can see why this thing is a really important thing to do with their family. And, pretty well universally, parents want to be a good parent. What that means in different cultures can be many different things. What is perceived to be a value, like the most important thing a parent can do for their children. But I think, the fundamental is they want to be a good parent for their kids. And so I think part of that role as artists is creating those spaces where we don't just talk directly to the kids, but we do acknowledge that kids exist in a family of some, that can be very varied, but they do exist in a family, and that family creates the structure for them to live day to day and grow on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis. And so in terms of the experiences that we create, we need to kind of acknowledge that larger landscape, and also find spaces to invite those parents in so that they too can kind of feel the value and see all those intangible, amazing benefits that you get when you go and experience a really great work. So like Alfredo's example of the dance party sounds fantastic in terms of, giving parents a specific space so that they can see how their kids are getting involved and see how they're engaging, but also making sure that, that they're not directly impacting that experience until they've had a moment to actually appreciate what it is, and then giving them space to be part of it. So yeah, it's different in all these different ways, but bringing in the entire family, I think, is really important in terms of having longevity for any kind of work.
It's nice that I think it seems that all our speakers here have something in common about this kind of adult and children relationship, that the key thing to navigate this is to not have the separation to start with. No, in different ways, you want to try to engage the adults, whether it's teachers or parents, into the same kind of plane and level with the children through different formats and different preparations and explanation and activities. So I think that's a really good way to start, and it's coming out very strong from all of your answers. So I think that's a very good takeaway for today, to kind of, so that it's not just in the art spaces, but how can we bring out these artistic practices into other areas where children live their lives too. We have other small questions, and I think they are directed to kind of this one common idea of whether educational arts or arts for children, or even art itself, is seen in your society as too hard, too abstract, too expensive, too, I don't know, too worthless, too much of something to be given importance to. So I think this is kind of a general impression from these questions. If you would like, there's a couple of last minutes if you have anything to respond to this kind of, I think, common perception, at least from Thailand. This can be quite a problem that obstructs, the development of arts, and also for children. So I'm not sure if you, from where you are you still struggling with these biases towards the arts, and therefore it obstructs your work in any way? Yes, Alfredo.
I feel like in the school, like, yeah, I have an answer. Yeah, we have a similar problem, and maybe I I quote a sentence of someone. Her name, she's dead since not that long. She's a programmer from Belgium. Her name was Free Lysen, and practically she answered, or let's say she criticized, or she gave an answer, let's say, to this problem. Practically what she says that maybe I find it. Yeah, may I read it shortly? Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, should be here. So no, I will not find the right exact text. I'm sorry. She practically just says that often we hear about programmers that are so that the things that the public is scared, or that the performance is not for them. And what she says is, who is this public? Is it like a monolithic block of people that we pretend to all know? For her point, it's not. And she thinks that the role of a programmer is being demanding. This is basically what she says. And I do agree on that. And I think that the role of programmers in that is also very important.
It sounds like we should also trust the public, right? And not judge them first. And they can be more diverse and varied than we think. And I think that applies also to the audience, who are the young people and children as well, that we can't have, one overarching bias that children must behave in this way if they are this and this many years old. And actually, from your diverse practices, this is already proven clearly. So yeah, it's 7 p.m. in Bangkok already, and I think it's a very complete and full discussion. So thank you again to all the speakers, Gemma Pepper, Takashi Matsumoto, Bunpong Panit, Alfredo Zinola, and Adrian and Jose. And I will give this to Ajima for the final closing, because this is already the finale session of Big Fest webinar. So to Ajima, please, if you're around.
Hello.
All right.
I was just so taken by the whole like conversation that I was like, oh, forgotten that I've muted myself and also my video. Thank you so much. Indeed, it's a finale. It's such a delightful one. And thank you, Pupe, for having conducted such a brilliant session and dialogues. I mean, it's an honor to have you here as an artistic director of BIPAM with your experience, not only as a programmer, as manager, but also as artist yourself. I mean, it's important to have your views around the work for young audiences and sharing it with the other artists. And thank you to all the speakers, I mean, for sharing your beliefs, your wonderful works, and for really reaffirming the value of the work for children and young people. I'm very touched, and it's so inspiring that I've decided to invite some of you to BICT Online, the move, which is happening later on in November. And for Gemma, I mean, I've seen so many great potentials for future collaborations. And, it's really, it's just been really wonderful. And thank you to the attendees. All the questions and your engagement, they're really brilliant. I mean, it's just been, enriching to us as BICT Fest team as well. And it's food for thought for us, for our future work. So thank you very much. And indeed, it's the end of this year's BICT Fest 2021 International Webinar. And thank you to also our funders, for our sponsors, for making it possible for us this year. Yes, I don't think, I have anything else to say. I think everyone needs to have their dinner now. So looking forward to seeing you in the future again. So until the next one, bye-bye for now. ขอบคุณมากค่ะ สวัสดีนะคะ
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for all the wonderful sharing.